This episode may contain sensitive language not suitable for children. Hello, and welcome back to Season 2 of Through Black Eyes Unfiltered, the podcast that brings truth to light. Listen to present-day historical events that shaped our history and will determine our future, as presented by moderator Raymond Dunn and expert Marvin Dunn. I'm Dr. Raymond Dunn, and I'm the author of 2 children's storybooks. My first storybook is The Little Scrub Christmas Tree. It's the story of a little tree that finds itself growing up in a Christmas tree forest. In the story, I have embedded many lessons that young children might learn that will help them as they mature. My second book is The Robin That Could Not Sing, and this is the story of a little bird that tried very hard to be like all of the other birds, and there are also lots of lessons involved in this book that young children might pick up as they read the story that would help them in their everyday lives and other obstacles that might come their way. Welcome to another episode of Through Black Eyes Unfiltered. I'm Dr. Raymond Dunn. I am your commentator.
I'm Dr. Marvin Dunn. I am the historian on this program.
And we are
the Dunn Brothers.
Today we will discuss an episode on military history, Black involvement in military history. Marvin, our dad was a cook in the Navy, and I think that was back in the early 40s. Would that be right? Around 42, 43?
That's correct.
Like
Correct. He joined the Navy in 1944. The war was almost over, and he went in very late because he had 5 sons. Mm-hmm. And the Navy took men who had the families of that size very late on in the process. But when our dad went into the Navy, Black men could only be stewards or cooks. There may have been a couple other billets that they could have had, but basically Blacks were taken into the Army, to the Navy rather, to serve white people.
Well, good.
White officers in particular.
Good, because I'm interested in the progression of Black naval personnel from cooks and stewards into what evolved in the late 50s, early 60s. I'm interested in that because I know you were in during that time. Our brother James was in during that time.
Yes.
We have a guest, Shed Dawson, who was in at that time. Could you share with us the progression?
The Navy was the last branch of the service to really do anything about integration. The Navy's view was that because sailors are on ships in very tight quarters, that you can't put Black and white sailors together because that would be trouble. So the Navy was very resistant to integration, particularly of its fighting forces at sea. What happened was President Kennedy. At John F. Kennedy's inauguration, Kennedy noticed when the Air Force Academy marched by, they had Black cadets. He noticed that when the Army, West Point walked by, they had Black men in the ranks. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Air Force, etc. When the Navy marched by with the Annapolis midshipmen, as they call future officers, Kennedy noticed that there was not a single Black person among these future officers. And remarked, why are there no Negroes among the midshipmen from Annapolis?
Go Kennedy.
Yes, well, as it turned out, Admiral George Anderson, who was the chief of naval operations, the most senior officer in the Navy, was sitting behind the president when he made these comments. And he became very sensitive to the fact that Kennedy was sensitive to the fact that there were no Black officers, men among the ranks of the midshipmen that he saw march by. So the Navy became very sensitive to having to get more officers who were Black into its ranks, particularly given the fact that Kennedy felt very strongly about this.
Let me pick this up with you, and then I'm going to bring in to this discussion also our brother Bill. You were
Bill? James, you mean?
No, I'm talking about Bill.
Oh, about him. Okay, all right.
Because you and Bill were both commissioned officers.
Yes.
I would like to think that as commissioned officers that you and Bill had it a little easier than our enlisted brothers. And we'll talk about James, and we'll talk about Shed, who is our guest, who were in those positions. But I know some of the stories that Bill told me about how his tour of duty was in the Navy as an officer. Share some of yours.
Well, I almost was not an officer at all. I joined the Navy right after I finished Morehouse College in 1961. I wanted to become an officer by going through officer candidate school at Newport, Rhode Island, and I joined the Navy in Miami and traveled to Jacksonville with a bunch of recruits who were not going to Officer Candidate School. They were just going into the regular Navy. And since I was the only college graduate among the group, I was put in charge of this group to take the bus from Miami to Jacksonville to the induction center. And we got there around evening time, right before dinner time, and the petty officer in charge of the recruits coming in called up the white men who'd come in with me and gave them a ticket that allowed them to go across the street to the White Hotel, the Roosevelt Hotel it was called, to stay overnight. And then when they were gone, he called me up and gave me a chit, as they called it, to go across the railroad track to a colored hotel, which turned out to be a house of prostitution. And that's where I had to stay overnight. Came back the next day and had not eaten, had not slept. I failed the test to go to Officer Candidate School.
Wow.
So they sent me to recruit camp at Great Lakes to be a recruit. But before I left, I complained that I'd been separated from the other sailors, had been sent to a substandard place to stay, had not eaten, and did badly on the test because of that. They said, "Oh, well, you're going to go on up to Great Lakes now and be a recruit." And right as I was finishing my recruit training, the Navy called me over to the captain's office, and they gave me another chance to take the test for Officer Candidate School, which I took and passed the next day. And that's how I became. If I hadn't written that letter in Jacksonville complaining about how they sent me to a black whorehouse instead of to a nice white hotel, I wouldn't have become an officer.
Let's extend that just a little bit beyond your experience, because as I recall, that was pretty much standard for black celebrities, right? Like the Duke.
That's right. They told me when they sent me across the railroad track to this colored hotel, and I came back the next morning. The petty officer told me, he said, "Well, that's where Duke Ellington stays. That's where Ella Fitzgerald. No one ever complained. Joe Louis has stayed over there." Yeah. He told me. So I don't give it. Still, I didn't sleep. There were chinches in the bed, and people coming in and out all night. And I didn't sleep. Getting back to President Kennedy, because Kennedy made it clear that he wanted more black officers. That's why they moved and had me take the test and eventually go to OCS.
Let me skip forward in your naval experience, because I think Kennedy comes into play twice in your experience.
Yes, he did. I met the president.
In the beginning, he came into play because he wanted more black personnel. Now, you've told me the story, but tell the story.
We got time for this?
Well, cut it short, but tell the story.
All right.
Of what happened when Kennedy came aboard your aircraft carrier.
President Kennedy was to spend 24 hours aboard this ship that I was on at the time, the USS Kitty Hawk. It was an attack aircraft carrier. And the Navy had given me an assignment to be on the bridge when the president was going to be on the bridge. They wanted Kennedy, I'm sure, to see that there was at least one black officer on that ship. And out of the 1,400 or so officers on the ship, I was the only black officer on that ship. So they had me on the bridge to be on the bridge when the president came, but he was
back that up. How many officers did you have on that ship?
About 1,400.
And this is the USS Kitty Hawk.
Right. In 1961, 62. There was one black officer.
That's what I want our audience to hear. Go ahead.
I couldn't hide. They had mine. Anyway, so I wanted to see the president as much as anybody else. So we had a big demonstration and getting ready for the president to come. They brought in 2 more carriers, some nuclear submarines and destroyers and all that. This big formation, jets flying over at supersonic speed. And I was on the bridge waiting, and my watch was over. And after 4 hours, you say to the captain, "Permission to leave the bridge, sir." And the captain automatically says, "Permission granted," to officers as they're leaving the watch. And the other 3 guys, white guys who were on watch with me, went up to the captain, "Permission to leave the bridge, sir." And the captain said, "Permission granted." I went up and he said, "Lieutenant, you remain on the bridge." That never happens, Ray. That's just a routine. You never say you can't go unless you're at war. So I had to stay my behind on the bridge. And the president came. He was late. I was now soaking because I could see the Navy was using me. And I watched Kennedy step off the helicopter. The ship was right off of San Diego, and eventually came up to the bridge and was sitting about 5 feet from me for about an hour. But I was, at that point, I was getting very upset with the situation. That I felt that I was being used.
Let me tell you how your experience with Kennedy impacted my future and what happened with me at the military. I, at the time, was a student at Florida A&M University, and I was looking forward to joining the Navy after graduating and also becoming an officer and serving just as you had served. You were my role model. I know you will recall you sent naval books for me to study and all that stuff while I was in school. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, when it was time for me to really go in, you said, "Ray, I'm coming out." And I said, "Bro, why are you coming out?" And that's what you told me. You told me because I'm nobody's window dresser.
Oh yeah, I was going to become the first black admiral. You know, the Navy was not sending black men to sea in those days. We had black officers who were doctors, physicians, dentists, supply officers, and what have you. But in terms of officers who were, as it was called, of the line.
Yeah, line officers.
Line officers. There were very, very few black line officers. So it was a rarity to have one when I was commissioned.
We'd like to thank our sponsors, Aris Crown All Natural Products and Clockwork Tracks, for providing our podcast music. Special thanks also to our editor, Tracks 53, as well as HGAB Studios and MRD2 Media.
You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at TBE Unfiltered, or go to our website at tbeunfiltered.com.
And when you do, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe.
See you next week.